Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I thought I'd show you a really fun acrylic block stamping technique, and we're going to be using these cute little Easter bunnies from the Art Impression set. So let's go ahead and get started. To start off, we're going to be grabbing the second largest die from the rectangle A2 double stitch dies, and for paper I'm using the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So I went ahead and die cut that, and you can see that leaves that beautiful stitch border all the way around. Now for the acrylic blocks, you can see that these little blocks have grid lines on them, and you get 3 different sizes in this one package. And these are from Hero Arts. And you get the all these different sizes, 1 by 4, 1 by 1, and 2 by 1.5 inches. So these are going to give us some really interesting backgrounds. For markers, I'm using my Tombow markers 243, 703, and 623. It's kind of a pink, lavender, and green color. And these are dual tip markers, so they have a brush tip on one end and kind of a pointy tip on the other end. So I'm just going to try to lay out my grid here and determine exactly how I want this to be. So again, I'm just kind of turning the block around here, just trying to decide. So to do my coloring, I'm actually going to apply the ink right to the block. But I'm trying to figure out where those little grid lines are. There is a little tiny bit of an impression on the side that has the grid lines, and you want to use the opposite side. So just test it with your marker. You'll be able to feel those grid lines. And again, you want the smooth side. Now I'm going to use my Ranger Mini Mister, and I'm bringing it up from the acrylic block a little bit, and I'm going to spritz that. So maybe about 6 or 8 inches away. And then I'm just going to start my first one, and I want to make sure I center that and line it up right along the bottom edge of the paper. That way I'll know that everything after this is going to be nice and straight. So you do want to press and hold it for a little while. What you're doing is giving it time for the ink to transfer to the paper. So just give it, I don't know, maybe about a minute or so, and then you can lift. And you will get these little areas where the ink puddles up a little bit. That's no problem. You can just pat it away with a paper towel, or you can just leave it there. In some cases, you'll see that I just leave it there. It gives some interesting texture to the background as well. So now I'm going on to that lavender color, and I'm going to cover the whole entire block here, and I want to make sure I have plenty of ink on there. Then again, from about 6 or 8 inches away, I'm going to give that a spritz. And I am using these mini misters because I do want the spray to be very fine. I wanted just a fine misting on the back of these blocks. Now I'm just going to press that down again, let that ink have time to transfer to my paper, and then I can lift it. And you'll see again, you get that kind of marbleized effect, which I really love. I think it gives it a lot of interest and a lot of texture. So now I'm going on to that green, that minty green color. And then I'll give that a nice spritz. And you want to give it 3 or 4 spritzes of water just to make sure you have enough, because you want that ink to move around a little bit on the paper just to spread out and cover that area. Now, if you want more of a splotchy kind of a look, you don't want to spritz it with as much water. You'll get a drier effect if you do that. And that's fun to play with, so just kind of play around with the inks and your papers here just to see what you like the best. Now you do want to use a water-based ink. So the Tombows are a water-based marker, so they do react with the water. But you could also use your little mini ink pads from Tim Holtz. Any water-based ink pads would work fine, or any water-based markers. You could use your Marvy La Plume markers as well here. So again, play around with that. Find the colors that you like the best. And now here, I don't need to ink up the entire block because we're just going down this side here. So I'm just inking it up about 3/4 of the way. And I'm applying quite a bit of pressure there just to make sure, again, that that ink transfers to the paper. So now, again, I don't need to ink up the entire block. Now, if you do get some of that ink pushing out from the sides, you can take a paper towel and just blot that up. Sometimes I did blot up if it was a lot of it. If it was just a little bit, I didn't mind that it kind of was blending into the ink next to it. Now here you'll see I got a little bit more ink there, so I'm just going to take the corner of my paper towel and just let that absorb up into the paper towel. I don't want to rub it along the edges because I don't want to move that ink down into the other inks. So again, just kind of play with this, practice a little bit, and there you can see I got a little extra again, so I'm just letting the corner of the paper towel pick up that ink. Now, once that background is done, I know it doesn't look like too much yet, but we're going to do a little bit more to it in a minute. I'm just going to let that sit and dry. So I've die cut another rectangle the same size as we did before. And for colors, I'm using 845, 925, and 985. And this is a red, orange, and yellow combination. And this time I want to create stripes along the cardstock here. So I'm going to just try to line up my paper fairly straight, and I'll do that again here in a second. And I'm starting with the red at the very top, and I'm using this long rectangular acrylic block this time. And then I'm going to grab the orange, and I don't need to go right up against each other because the water will force these to blend together. But if you do go up against the other color, don't worry about that. You can just scribble your marker onto your scrap paper and it'll clean it right off. So now I'm going to spritz that with a generous amount of water here. And then I'm going to just make sure I line up this first one as straight as I can. Just take a little time there because then everything after this will be nice and straight. And again, I'm pressing that out, and you can see where those colors are just blending together there. So I didn't have to do the blending on the block. The water will do that for us. And this was my favorite one. I just think this is beautiful, the way this blends together. And you get some of that puddling, but I kind of like that. So you'll see throughout this one that sometimes I just leave that there. Now, again, I'm going to do the same thing. And just think of the different combinations you could use here that would just be so beautiful. Some blues or greens would be gorgeous here. If you were doing like a water scene, you could do some beautiful blues in this technique. There you see me blotting up just a little tiny bit there of that little bit of a puddle. And that one I thought was a little bit dark, so I'm just going to blot that just a tiny bit. But again, I do love the look that you get here. That was, like I say, this was my favorite one. Now I'm using the rainbow colors. So 535, 606, 245, 985, 925, and 856. And I will list all of these marker colors down below and also on my blog. And I'll list all the products as well. So I'm starting with the red. So I'm going to go in rainbow order here. And this is the little 1x1 block that we're using to do this. And I'm just going to go straight down the side of this. Now, I cut this down so this panel is just going to have the stitching on the top, the side, and the bottom. So this is from that largest rectangle die. So I didn't need the whole thing. I'm just using a little portion of it here. And we're going to cut away some of that excess. Now you could also do this blending on that long acrylic block as well if you wanted these colors to blend more together. I wanted to keep them separate, so that's why I'm using this little 1x1 block, but you could use a long acrylic block here and blend all these together. I'll just do that last color. So now let's go back to that first one. Now that it's nice and dry, I'm using my Zig Millennium pen. This is just a black, pure black, permanent marker, and it's got a very fine detail tip on it. So I'm just going to line this up nice and straight here on my grid. And to keep it from moving, I'm adding a little bit of my Tombow tape there just to hold it in place. So I'm going to make sure the grid's on my acrylic ruler. This is the Tim Holtz Ideology acrylic ruler. And I'm using the grids on the ruler and the grids on my glass mat to make sure this is nice and straight. And I'm doing a dash dot dot pattern. You could certainly just do a stitch pattern here or any pattern. I love to play with the patterns that I use. So this is, again, a dash dot dot pattern, which is going to define these little grid areas. I like to clean off my ruler between lines because you just don't want to transfer any of that black ink onto anything. And especially if you're using a thick marker to do your lines, you want to make sure you clean that off because you can end up having that black still on your ruler and transferring it onto your paper. So just beware of that. So now again, I'm just going to continue filling in all these little grid areas. And it's kind of a brick pattern that we have here, but it's not perfect. But those lines will kind of tie everything together. Now for the rainbow, again, I'm just going to cut that down. I just want one little strip here. And it will have the stitching on the top, the side, and on the bottom. And just to bring this whole thing together, I'm going to add some little black polka dots. I'm going back to that permanent black pen, and I'm just going to tie that together with some black dots. Now using my white gesso, I'm going to spatter this pattern here. So this one is now dry. So I'm going to go ahead and spatter this entire panel with the white gesso. Again, I'm just trying to tie this all together. So I want to bring this pattern together here. So the white spattering will just bring this whole panel together. And you can see you have some thick and thin areas of that white, and I like that. It adds a lot of texture. So going on to our stamps, we've got these cute little bunnies. We're going to be using those 3 bunnies there. And this is the Easter Bunnies set from Art Impressions. And you get some really cute sentiments as well, which we'll be using a little bit later on. So I've grabbed the 3 little bunnies that I want here, and I'm going to go ahead and ink those up with the versafine onyx black ink. And I'm using my mini stamp positioner to do this. This is the Mini Misty. Now what I'm going to do here is cut out these little images, and I'm leaving a little white border all the way around. And when you're cutting these, you want to move your paper, not your scissors. So you can see that I'm turning the paper here. And I'm leaving that little white edge, and I'll continue doing that for all 3 of these. Now I've got my 3 cards and my 3 black panels. So the black panels measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so they'll fit right on the front of our standard A2 size top folding cards. So I'm just going to go ahead and attach all of these panels to my cards. And again, since I'm making like a little set of note cards, I want everything to kind of coordinate. So I'm doing them all the same, just all with that black panel on them. And I've used the largest rectangle die to do these. So I've added the adhesive to this, and I'm going to go ahead, and now I've got all 3 of those all set. And now I can start attaching these panels to my cards. This one I'll just center here on the front of the card. And that black stitching that we created will also tie in that black as well. And then for this little rainbow one, I'm just putting it off to the left-hand side, and that'll go right to the top and bottom of the card here. And I'm going to bring it in maybe about a 1/2 inch. So now for the mounting of our little images, I'm using the Kaiser scrapbook mounting foam dots, and these are really super thick. It's about as thick as if you doubled up your Scotch foam mounting tape, maybe even a little bit thicker than that. So I wanted to give these a lot of dimension because I'm not coloring them in. I'm just going to leave these black and white. So this is a great way to do it. If you don't love coloring, this is a really simple, easy way to create some really cute cards. So I'm just going to pop these up, and I think it's a very dramatic look to just have the black and white on this beautiful colored background. Now we will be adding some sentiments to these as well, so you can see how those look. Now going back to that same stamp set, I'm going to use all three of those little sentiments. Now since I had already added the foam mounting tape, I'm taking that foam pad out of the Mini Misty, just so that I can make sure that I get a nice stamping here. Now you could have done your stamping beforehand, and if you're not sure about this, go ahead and do your stamping first. I just wasn't exactly sure which sentiments I was going to put where, so I saved that for the end. So I'm stamping Happy Easter on that one. And for this one, it just says hopping by to say hi. And for this one here, I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool and just make sure that I have no powder that's going to stick, because we're going to be using some super fine detail white embossing powder from Ranger. And I'm using my Versamark ink pad to do the stamping. And you want to make sure you ink that up really well. And this is going to say Happy Easter, Happy Spring, Happy Everything. I'm going to sprinkle on some of that detail embossing powder. And I find using the detailed embossing powder the best way to go here. It just gives a nice crisp image. I'm using my brush just to brush away any excess powder there. And then I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. Now do make sure this is nice and cool before you wipe off that powder. I've done this before when the powder is hot and you can actually smudge it. So make sure everything's cool. Now using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and these Buttons Galore and More Sparklettes embellishments, I'm going to be using the Crystal Hearts, which are just some clear hearts. And then I'm using the red hearts as well. And then for the last one here, I'm going to use these really pretty pastel pinks. This is the Barefoot Beach collection. So I went ahead and attached these to my card using that Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. And let me give you a closer look at these cards. So on this one, I used that pastel pink just to tie this together a little bit. And you can see that beautiful grid pattern that we get. And again, play around with these patterns. There's just so many possibilities with these. And I love this one. Again, this is my favorite. I just think those colors just blended together so beautifully. And that has the little red hearts on it. And this one has the clear hearts, which you can see kind of pick up that rainbow sparkle a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to visit me at pinkwhisperdesigns.com. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.